Hey, welcome into Candlestick Chronicles, a 49ers podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Kyle Madson. I write about the 49ers over at NinersWire.com, part of the USA Today Sports Media Group. As always, Chris Biderman joining me as well, and we're going to dive into the DeVonta Smith contract extension that was signed on Monday. Actually, I shouldn't say it was signed on Monday. I don't know when he signed it, but it was reported Monday that DeVonta Smith and the Eagles agreed to a 3-year contract extension. We'll talk about what that means for Brandon Aiyuk. It's kind of an interesting discussion to be had there. And then I want to talk about a couple of draft things. We'll also have a guest on later in the week to do some more draft stuff, as we're just less than 2 weeks out from the NFL draft. So we'll be deep diving into some of that. But a draft analyst said an interesting thing about the 49ers that I disagree with, and I want to talk about it with you, Chris. So we will do that. But before we do that, shout out to the homies at Lamb Chops. sglambchops.com is the website. The clothing is high quality. It's comfortable. Our hoodies are some of our favorite things to wear. Chris, you wore yours courtside in an NBA game. Pretty incredible.
Allegedly. Purportedly.
Some are saying.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm wearing sweatpants right now. We absolutely love all the Lamb Chops clothing. The sweat shorts, perfect for spring. Hanging out around the house, going out, being stylish. The animal print mesh shorts are about to come out. Because it is starting to get a little warmer here in the Central Valley of Sacramento. So you can bet those are going to be back in the regular rotation as they were pretty much all of last year. So yeah, shout out to the homies at Lamb Chops, and they're continuing to kill it with their partnership with the Minnesota Timberwolves. It seems like all of their stuff is just getting yanked off the shelves when their Letterman jackets and shirts and sweats go on sale at Wolves games. So shout out to everybody over there. That's super cool. And yeah, for keeping us fitted, for keeping us comfortable and stylish, obviously.
Timberwolves Suns going to be a fascinating playoff series, and I'm looking forward to it. We of course are pulling for the Timberwolves and our guys out there in Minnesota. But sglambchops.com is the website. Promo code Candlestick20. Get 20% off your order today. We're also sponsored by Prize Picks. Love Prize Picks so much. Been crushing it this baseball season, dude. It turns out I am a baseball Prize Picks wizard. I'm having a great time with it.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
I had no idea. I had not had Prize Picks last baseball season. So I finally got to dive in once this season started, and I'm doing great. You can do great too. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports. It's super easy. You pick 2 to 6 players. You pick more or less on those players' stat projections, and then you watch the winnings pile up. At least that's what I've been doing. First inning runs allowed, more or less half a run. That's a fun one to dive in on, and I've been making a lot of hay on it. I've also stopped creating 6 player entries. I'm down to 3. You go 3 with a flex play, dude. 3 with a flex play. Yeah, dude. Just okay. And cruising along and having a ton of fun. And you will too. Go to prizepicks.com/candlestick, promo code Candlestick for a first deposit match up to $100. The website is prizepicks.com/candlestick, promo code Candlestick for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's talk 49ers. So DeVonta Smith got paid a 3-year contract extension from the Philadelphia Eagles. 3 years, $75 million, $51 million guaranteed. Good news for the 49ers, man. Very, very good news for them as their contract negotiations continue with Brandon Aiyuk. And I think the big deal for me, Chris, is less about, this means the Niners will now get, because remember the year Debo got paid, it was like DK Metcalf and AJ Brown and Debo just all kind of got a very similar contract. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Niners are necessarily looking at this and going, okay, hey, 3 for 75 at 51 guaranteed. That's what we can get Brandon Aiyuk for. But what I do think this does is because DeVonta Smith, who is a crazy similar player production-wise to Aiyuk, it keeps the numbers from getting out of hand.
Yeah.
It means the numbers, even if Ayuk gets more, 2 or 3 more million per year than DeVonta Smith, it's still, 27, 28 million and not 31, 32, where the 49ers might look at it and go, yeah, no, we're not paying that.
Yeah, absolutely. It keeps that number at, like a relatively modest rate. Like the
Right.
fact that a very similarly productive player is making 25, Brandon Ayuk's going to lose a little bit of leverage if he's asking for 30, 32, right? Just something out of the norm or way atop the market. So I'm in agreement with you. Look, I've been of the mind all along that this is probably going to get sticky publicly. It's going to be Brandon Aiyuk unfollowing the 49ers on social media, which apparently he's unfollowed the team on Instagram already. A complete stunner. I wouldn't be surprised at all if a trade request comes, but that hasn't come yet, despite what's been floating around on the internet. We saw Brandon Aiyuk's agent take to Twitter to dispute a report that he did request a trade. He has not, according to his agent. So, this is always going to get done. Like, I think Brandon Aiyuk understands like what his value is in the league. It's that he deserves to make 25, 26, 27 million dollars a year. He's probably looking at somewhere between 55 and 65 or 70 million dollars guaranteed. And it's just going to be, these contracts are hard to get done, and particularly for a team like the 49ers that have a lot of highly paid guys, it's just hard to make everybody fit and also make that player happy. And it's why we see these contract negotiations drag on throughout the summer. It's why Nick Bosa's massive deal didn't get signed till just before the start of the regular season, causing him to miss training camp. It's why George Kittle and Fred Warner's deals didn't get done until, right around the start of training camp. It's why Deebo Samuel's contract got those discussions between him and the team got ugly at a point before he signed his contract a couple years ago. Right. So like, this is all just kind of par for the course. But I'm in full agreement with you in that DeVonta Smith getting this deal, a 3-year, $75 million extension to his contract. I do think that's good for the 49ers, because if Smith did get like 30 a year, then you're like, all right, maybe the 49ers now get to that puke point because of what the market is. But I think if the market is 25 to 28, then I think the 49ers are going to be perfectly comfortable with that, because, like we've explained many times before too on this podcast, like the 49ers are more than likely going to create ways to pay Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel at the same time, or at least have them both on big contracts. They might not both be on the team when their cap hits are at their largest. And I think next offseason is going to be the offseason of Deebo Samuel stuff again. But for now, I think Deebo is going to be on the team in 2024, maybe not in 2025, but that means that the 49ers are going to be able to pay their receiving core and help out Brock Purdy in 2024.
I've seen this angle where people have said, if Brandon Aiyuk makes X amount of money, then the 49ers will be paying their receiver room X amount. It's like, well, first of all, not necessarily, and B, so their quarterback is making less than $1 million. They can kind of do whatever they want. So I thought that this was. I already thought that they were gonna get a deal done with Aiyuk. I think all the trade stuff is really overblown, and I don't say that to say that they definitely 100% will not trade him. That's certainly on the table. But the only way I thought that would wind up being on the table was if they reached that spot where their ceiling is $29 million, and they're not going a penny over that. And Aiyuk was dug in firm at 30, and they're going, all right, well, then we're going to lose him next year anyway, so we'll let him go. We'll trade him. And now I think that's even less of, I think there's even less of a chance of that now. I know that the trade stuff is going to be out there because it's a wide receiver who could be available for trade. So people are going to put out their trade rumors, and any time a team calls the 49ers, or if the 49ers talk to a team about it's going to be like, oh man, he's going to go to, and Brandon Ayuk's tweeting at Mike Tomlin and all that. I just, like you said, it's going to get sticky. It's going to be that way publicly, and they're going to argue over every penny. And the Niners first, if they've made a real offer yet, which I'm not even sure if they have, is going to be low, and it's going to piss Ayuk off, and da 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 da. Like it's all in the playbook. But the bigger deal is that a player like DeVonta Smith, who Eric Branch tweeted the numbers today, and they are remarkably similar over the last 5 years. It's a little bit different because Ayuk is a year older than DeVonta Smith, but their numbers over the last 3 years are almost identical. DeVonta Smith has 19 touchdowns. Brandon Aiyuk has 20. DeVonta Smith, 240 catches. Brandon Aiyuk, 209. 3,178 yards for DeVonta Smith. 3,183 for Brandon Aiyuk. And it's crazy how similar they are as players. Yeah. And we've kind of been waiting on the contract because like the Mike Evans one doesn't quite work out. You can't really compare that with Brandon Aiyuk. There hasn't been a good wide receiver contract to go, okay, that's the one. And this is it. Like, this is the one. It's the DeVonta Smith deal, and it's a good one for the 49ers. So I think if you can wind up getting Aiyuk for, let's just call it a 3-year deal. If you do 3 and 81 with 58 million guaranteed, then I think you sign, seal, deliver, and move on, or something like that. Something in that ballpark.
It would be interesting to see what the years end up being. Like, is it going to be 3 years? Because, like, I think an element, and this is just me speculating, but I think an element of Deebo Samuel only getting a 3-year deal was that the 49ers kind of worry about his play style a little bit long term. And you kind of see that, showing up with some of the injuries he's dealt with throughout his career, like a guy who just delivers and takes big hits constantly. Mm-hmm. I do think Brandon Ayuk's game is going to age much better than Deebo's. And so I wonder, like, do you sign a receiver like that to a 4 or 5 year deal? Or does Brandon Aiyuk say, give me a 3-year deal so I could get to free agency again, and by the time the cap explodes, I can, be getting $35-40 million if I continue on my trajectory, right? So there's an element of that for sure. I'm sure the 49ers, like, ideally have a set number of years in mind, and I'm sure Brandon Aiyuk is either thinking, like, I either want as much long-term security as possible with maybe a 5-year deal, or I want to get to free agency as quickly as possible with a 3-year deal. Or do you bridge the gap with, a 4-year deal and whatever? I just, these deals are very, very complicated. Like, far more complicated than we ever really see with injury guarantees and bonuses and structures and all of this stuff. It's why we're always proponents of waiting on the structure before reacting to what the initial numbers are.
It's a must, dude.
On X, formerly Twitter.
Honestly, it's stunning that we're doing this pod without knowing the full structure of DeVonta Smith's deal. We'll do another
what
one.
Percentage? Ben Wood in the YouTube chat asked if you're watching us on YouTube or
what up, Pedro?
X.
Formerly Twitter.
Shout out to everyone who's streaming with us the video online on this beautiful Monday night. What percentage you putting on Aiyuk being on this roster in 2 years? For me, it's high. Like, I think if he signs, if and when he signs this deal, it's gonna put him under contract for at least the next 3 years. It could. I'm
at 98%
too. Yeah, that's same. Like somewhere between that 95-100 percentile.
Yeah, I'm not doing 100%.
I've seen some people talking about, like,
never say never.
Why wouldn't Brandon Aiyuk just wait, like, play on his 5th-year option and then wait to sign a contract next offseason?
Nuts.
Look, man, like, he could, knock on wood, and I'm not, hopefully this doesn't happen, but, like, you remember, like, Alex Smith's leg injury? Like, stuff happens in the league where dudes suffer these terrible injuries and then they're never the same. If he were to have something like that happen to him, there's no way he's getting a contract with $50, $60, $70 million guaranteed next offseason. You get that contract as soon as you can, if you've been as productive as Brandon Aiyuk has been with back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, or you've been the leading receiver, the leading pass catcher
Yeah.
on one of the best offenses in the NFL. You don't wait to get that payday,
Yep.
because for most of these NFL guys, that second contract they get after their rookie contract, that's their best bite of the apple.
Yep.
Very, very, very few NFL players get to that third contract where it's still a ton of money. So if you've been in the league for 3 years, like Brandon Aiyuk has, and you're eligible for an extension after a couple 1,000-yard seasons, you do, like, in my opinion, you do not show up to the off-season program. You don't show up to training camp. You do not risk your body and your financial well-being, just because, oh yeah, like I could maybe make a little bit more next off-season and I'll play on my 5th-year option. It's like a lot of NFL players are broke, and it's not about the amount of money they make. It's about the decision-making. But like, it's easy to go broke. It's easy to go broke when you make a lot of money. Like, don't let the fact that you have a lot of money like fool you. Like, stuff can happen. So these dudes are wise to get the bag as early as possible. And in Brandon Ayuk's case, he's got to strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, he already. I mean, he was eligible before last season, and
Right.
he decided to bet on himself, and had the best season of his career. And now this is when you do it, because betting on yourself again is just not something a lot of guys do, because he doesn't need to. He's going to get a deal in the top 10 at his position, maybe top 5, depending on how that deal shakes out. There's no reason for him to go out and risk injury, long or short term. If he does if what happened to Dre Greenlaw happens to Brandon Aiyuk, like, that dramatically changes his earning power next year. It doesn't even have to be a career-altering injury. If he goes out and has a bad year, his leverage is dramatically less than it is right now. So yeah. I'm all for Brandon Aiyuk, like you said. Maybe show up to camp and do the hold in thing where you're there but not working out. But yeah, I don't step foot on a football field without a contract.
Well, and there's like a very real scenario where the 49ers could draft a receiver with the 31st overall pick. Brandon Aiyuk suffers a high ankle sprain, is out 4 to 6 weeks, and maybe the Niners draft a baller at 31, and then it's like, oh, Brandon Ayuk's going back to the well, or going back to try to get a contract after a 400-yard season. You know, when like it was clear he wasn't nearly as valuable, in part because the 49ers drafted somebody who's now balling out. So it's like,
right.
No, if you're Brandon Aiyuk, you got to get your contract now.
You could have just said Lad McConkey, dude. It's fine.
Man, Barrows dropped his draft crush, and I was honestly pretty surprised. It wasn't Lad McConkey. Adonai Mitchell from Texas.
A.D. Mitchell. Yeah.
Listen,
I
love Matt Barrows. I consider him a close friend. I consider him somebody who I've looked up to for a while. The fact that, you know, I essentially replaced him at the Sacramento Bee after like reading his work for as long as I did. Probably one of the greatest honors in my career, to be honest, because he's so damn good at what he does. But it's not the first time I've disagreed with him on a player eval. Him and I drove to Solomon Thomas's pro day at Stanford in 2017, and I came away with it like, oof, I don't think the Niners should draft that guy. And Barrows came away with it writing that Solomon Thomas was his draft crush that year. So, you know, I love Matt Barrows. He's phenomenal at what he does, but man, I just don't see Adonai Mitchell being a 49ers or a Kyle Shanahan type receiver. Maybe a really good deep threat, but as we've seen in Kyle Shanahan's offense and his team building, he's kind of used a deep threat as sort of a decoy type guy, right? Like you think of, you know, like if he's gonna draft a speed guy, it's gonna be somebody maybe like Danny Gray in the 3rd round. It's not gonna be somebody who isn't particularly great with the ball in his hands, yards after the catch. And you know, I don't know that really. I mean, I'm not here to say Adonai Mitchell is not going to be a good player. But I just don't really see the fit. You remember, like, he averaged, I think, 3.5 or 3.2 yards after the catch. Brandon
Yes.
Aiyuk in Arizona State averaged
Led the
13.6
nation.
yards after the catch. Led the nation.
Yeah.
And Brandon Aiyuk was very much like like his best routes in college were like screens and short routes, right? And that's what's translated to Kyle Shanahan's offense. We haven't seen dudes that are like predominantly deep threats translate all that well to Kyle Shanahan's offense, because the way Kyle Shanahan evaluates receivers, like this was kind of the Dante Pettis thing, right? Like, he looked at Dante Pettis as somebody who could potentially run really good routes because of how elusive he was with the ball in his hands as a punt returner. And he looked at, like, man, if you're elusive with the ball in your hands, I could probably teach you how to run routes. That worked with Brandon Aiyuk. That certainly worked with Deebo Samuel. Didn't work with Dante Pettis because Dante Pettis was not tough and not physical at all.
Right.
Maybe Adonai Mitchell is physical, but it feels like a square peg round hole situation trying to get a deep threat receiver, into this particular version of the offense. It's not to say it couldn't work. I just see Lad McConkey. I just think that would work way more and like be a much more seamless fit. And if you're zooming out long term to, the idea that Deebo Samuel is not going to be with the team in 2025 or even beyond that, or even Juwan Jennings for that, like in that case, like if Juwan Jennings is not going to be with the team next year when he's scheduled for free agency, Lad McConkey as a slot guy, bless you, Kyle, could be
Thanks.
could make some sense filling in for those guys down the road. And when you talk about a guy who really fits Brock Purdy, like Brock Purdy's good at throwing the deep ball, don't get me wrong. I would say the precision in the short and intermediate game is really the strength of Brock Purdy's game. And a receiver like Lad McConkey, like, to me, makes a lot more sense than Adonai Mitchell, just given the differing skill sets in the way they would complement the quarterback that the 49ers have.
Yeah, the thing that sticks out to me with A.D. Mitchell as it pertains to the 49ers is I have seen more cut-ups of A.D. Mitchell taking plays off when the ball is not coming to him than I have seen cut-ups of A.D. Mitchell making great plays. And I think that is a pretty sizable problem if Kyle Shanahan cuts on the film and it's a play where, maybe because you're not going to get the ball every time. And there are things Kyle Shanahan wants his receivers to do that are trying to move defenders and get them to different places on the field to open things up for other guys. And if you have a receiver who's consistently not finishing routes because the ball's not coming to him, that's going to be a problem. The first note in his overall, the portion of Dane Brugler's Beast, which if you don't subscribe to The Athletic, The Beast, which is a like massive, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's 324 pages of draft breakdown that Dane Brugler does every year. And it's really good.
And it's probably just the best, most concise analysis really anywhere.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. So Dane Brugler writes, and I trust Brugler a lot when it comes to draft analysis. He's the first line is, overall, Mitchell needs to become a more detail-focused receiver. And that is to me, when you're picking Kyle Shanahan guys, like that is a massive red flag. Because so much of what Kyle Shanahan wants in his offense is detail-oriented.
Well, you remember in his second season when Brandon Aiyuk was in the quote-unquote doghouse, it was like attention to detail.
Yes.
That was like part of the issue. So like, I think, going into this and maybe we talk about it in another draft preview pod or we can talk about it now, but I think we've mentioned it before. But even like my ethos, if I'm drafting for the 49ers this spring, I'm taking guys that I think can play and can contribute sooner rather than later. I don't have much tolerance for projects who are going to have a hard time developing with a lack of playing time because you have such a veteran-laden roster without a whole lot of opportunity at a ton of snaps, given that you have most of your starters already in place, right? Like, so for me, like at 31, I'm not really taking a project. I'm not really interested in taking a receiver who struggles with attention to detail type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe Adonai Mitchell, maybe he becomes a really great, maybe he's DK Metcalf, who knows? But for me, like, I think it's a sizable risk in taking somebody who has those types of concerns, whereas, you could get somebody who was more productive in college. And I'm not saying college production is everything, because there's,
Mm-hmm.
like talent evaluation, and I'm not trying to sit here and say I'm smarter than anybody else when it comes to talent evaluation. But
Mm-hmm.
I think talent evaluation is such an art, not a science. And it's all, there's so much that goes into it. But I think when you're a certain team and your hope is that we're trying to win a Super Bowl and we might be 2 or 3 players away from beating the Kansas City Chiefs in overtime to win a Super Bowl, I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to find guys that can help on the margins, whether it's Jackson Powers Johnson, who might be able to solidify the interior of my offensive line when I'm going against Chris Jones in a big game,
Mm-hmm.
or if Lad McConkey can help me convert a 3rd and medium in the 4th quarter of a Super Bowl in a way that I otherwise couldn't without him, right? Or, like,
Mm-hmm.
or if somebody, if Cooper DeJean can come in and, like, cover Travis Kelce credibly and
Mm-hmm.
help you on 3rd down. Like, those are the type of guys I'm looking for. I'm not necessarily looking for projects who, have, like, oh, this guy has better traits. It's like, well, who's better at playing football? Because I really need the guy who's better at playing football right now, because my window is right now. And that's sort of how I would approach this. So that's why, like, when it comes to the Mitchell versus McConkey conversation, I would probably lean McConkey. Both stylistically, I think he fits better with Brock Purdy, but
Mm-hmm.
also philosophically, just like where the 49ers are in their window. Like, is Mitchell going to develop if he's playing 8 snaps and running go routes next season while Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk get all the reps? Or can
Mm-hmm.
somebody like Lad McConkey play out of the slot? Can he return punts and kicks? Can he, provide your offense an element that it's otherwise lacking?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I don't know that the 49ers really need Mitchell as much as they would somebody who could help, convert 3rd and 5 in a big spot, like
Yeah.
McConkey potentially could. Sorry to be on my soapbox.
No, it's fine. Um, yeah, he's not going to be DK Metcalf. I promise.
Okay, you promise?
I think that he lacks play strength. No, DK Metcalf is, to me, not. I know you meant from a production standpoint, but
Right.
I don't think
I love
I
when
don't
I
think
think
AD Mitchell's got the facilities for that.
I really like when talent evaluators or people on the internet talk about core strength. Like, oh, he plays with a lot of core strength. Like, I just
Totally.
need a paragraph from somebody just outlining exactly how they can evaluate core strength by watching guys play football on YouTube. I kind of need that in my life.
Lad McConkey. Size and vulnerability to injuries aren't ideal, but he is a sudden, skilled route runner and uses synchronized shake to tie defensive backs in knots. You know how much I love a synchronized shake.
Yeah. I mean,
Last
who doesn't?
No, everybody does. Last draft thing for today. I believe Danny Kelly of The Ringer is going to join us. He's a draft analyst for The Ringer. I believe he's going to join us tomorrow for a pod that will drop Wednesday. I believe. And we'll do a deeper dive into some of these prospects. But I want to address something that I saw written about the 49ers that I don't necessarily mean this is about this player specifically, but I thought the idea was interesting and I wanted to discuss it on the podcast. So Tony Pauline of Sportskeeda, I believe is where he writes now, wrote this in a draft nuggets thing. So he's talking about Marshawn Nealand, the pass rusher from Western Michigan. He wrote, so who could take Nealand and where will he go? The San Francisco 49ers were hot on his trail, but the team signed 2 pass rushers in free agency, so cross them off the list. Whether it's Marshawn Nealand or any other pass rusher, I think the idea that the 49ers would not pursue pass rush help because they signed Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos this offseason is insane. And I think it's I think it's just a lot. It's the same thing. People go, well, they're obviously going to take an offensive lineman around one. I don't think that's necessarily true, because if a good defensive lineman falls to them, they will have no problem taking that. John Lynch talked about when the Niners were trying to pursue a Khalil Mack trade in 2018, was that? 2018, 2019,
Yes.
whenever that was,
Yeah,
a few years ago.
It was before because they drafted Bosa and traded for D Ford in 2019.
Right. That's right. He compared the importance of a pass rush on defense to the importance of the quarterback on offense. This is the thing. They have invested resources in that spot time and time again. And whether in free agency or via the draft, and Gross-Matos is going to play inside and as well as on the edge, but I'm guessing he'll do a lot of work inside. And Leonard Floyd is a fine player, but you have him for a couple of years, and he's a veteran. If they have a chance to draft a edge rusher that they think can be a real every down player in the NFL in either the first or second round, they're going to do it without hesitation. And it's gonna it's not they're not gonna go, oh well, we signed these two guys in free agency, so we don't need that anymore. No, every team needs pass rush depth all the time. The 49ers specifically, given what their defense is and how they want to construct their defense, they need pass rush depth more than maybe not any other team, but as much as any other team. So I don't think that as we kind of go through this and as we talk about 49ers needs and stuff, I don't think we can just cross off defensive line because free agency. They're gonna try and improve those spots. And if they think that Marshawn Nealand or Chop Robinson or whoever else can help them this year and for the next 4 or 5 years, they're gonna go get that player and feel great about it.
But do you feel like Chop Robinson is girthy enough to be a 3-down guy?
I love his lightning quick first step. I think he needs to develop some counters. He's get better hand usage for sure.
Right.
But no, I
be better in a phone booth.
Dude, love I went to England recently, and I got to tell you, I'm pretty good in a phone booth.
Like last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so needs change instantaneously at any point throughout the season. You know, I think probably the most overrated thing that people look at is draft needs. You remember when the 49ers drafted Mike McGlinchey in 2018? Like, it was all, you know, was it Derwin James? Is it going to be Tremaine Edmonds? Is it going to be, like, there were all these dudes, and the internet just kind of like focused in on these 4 or 5 guys, none of whom were Mike McGlinchey. Right. And then it was, oh, the 49ers are actually all the way out on Trent Brown. They're going to trade Trent Brown and draft Mike McGlinchey. Tackle didn't appear to be a need because Trent Brown seemed like a pretty good to very good tackle at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the 49ers used their first round pick on Mike McGlinchey. So, like, you know, I don't find like pre-draft needs. You know, people look on the internet for all these things. Like, it just doesn't seem pertinent to me. Like, the Niners are going to draft a player that they want at a position in the long term, who they think best fits who they are and what's going to help them for the longest.
Sure.
It's a premium position. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. And like, how big of a roles have like Charles Omenihu and Jordan Willis carved out for themselves just as depth players along the defensive line? It's like injuries happen. Like, any of these dudes could be gone for the year, an injury during OTAs, and then, you know, you're 2 months removed for the draft and you didn't get an edge rusher, and then your guys are hurt or somebody sprains an ankle and is out for, you know, a month and a half. Like, like this stuff just happens. And so you have to insulate yourself. And it's why you just like for me, if I were drafting, I would look at like all the premium positions, and maybe I would be less inclined to take a guy if we had a bunch of players at his particular position. But if I loved that prospect a lot more than other ones, I wouldn't care if I was crowded at that position if I had guys, veteran guys on
Right.
short-term contracts.
Yeah.
I'd be like, yeah, no, I like that guy, and that's the guy I'm taking. Because when you draft guys, you really have to be convicted. You have to like think like, no, I really believe in this dude. Like the Niners believing in Fred Warner's ability to play middle linebacker, despite him basically playing nickelback at BYU, is one of the reasons why he's so good. And why, like, you just have to have that belief that a guy can come in. You can't just look at all. We can't all just look at it like, oh, he didn't really play much linebacker in college, so he might not be good. It's like, no, the Niners were really, really had a lot of conviction in the person and the character and his ability to like know formations and offensive tendencies and things like that. So you just get the best guys you can, really. Just get all the best guys you can, regardless of position. And Leonard Floyd's a good player, but like, it's not going to prevent me from taking an edge rusher if I really believe that there's a potentially special one there that you could get.
This could be a topic for a different pod. I know we kind of got to get out of here, but I don't also know that the 49ers believe offensive tackle is as big of a need as a lot of us do.
Yeah.
To the point that if they're going to trade up to draft an offensive tackle or reach for an offensive tackle the way I think they kind of reached for Javon Kinlaw in 2020. Although I got it at the time, so I don't want to do the hindsight thing, but I think they reached a little bit for Javon Kinlaw because they felt like, okay, we need defensive tackle, so we're going to draft for need here, number one above all things. So I don't know if they're going to view offensive tackle as that type of need where they go and they trade up into the teens to draft one of the top 5 tackles. They're giving up all these assets to go get an offensive tackle. I know it's a big need, but I don't know that the Niners are that out on Colton McKivitz that they would go do that instead of sitting there at 31 and, hey, maybe a good edge rusher that they really like. They think that he's going to fall there, so they're going to stick at 31 and do that and then figure out the tackle stuff later. Like I think that it's that big of a need. I'm kind of out on McKivitz long term, but I'm not totally certain the Niners are.
So I agree with you. I think for Kyle Shanahan specifically, it is easier for him to scheme around a mismatch that he's dealing with an edge rusher against his tackle than it is with an elite interior lineman against his guard. Right? Like,
no doubt.
We've seen it with like Micah Parsons. Like Kyle Shanahan can make Micah Parsons head spin by running these misdirection plays and leaving him unblocked, and then he's running right into George Kittle or Kyle Juszczyk or any number. Like the Niners, Kyle Shanahan does a great job. I think one of the most interesting things he does, or maybe not interesting, maybe that's not the word, but one of the most unique things he does is when it comes to elite edge rushers, just keep them, like, give them a ton of different looks, give them a ton of different guys to deal with. Like Micah Parsons has kind of been a non-factor when going against the 49ers, even though he's miles better than Colton McKivitz, right? And it's because Kyle Shanahan can just kind of keep him off balance by the tempo of the plays or where the play is going or how he's being blocked. That's a lot easier to do with the guy on the edge than it is along the interior. And if you talk to scouts, one thing they'll tell you about the difference between like interior guys and tackles is you have to be able to adjust on the fly a lot faster along the interior than on the edge, because when you're on the edge, everything's kind of in front of you and you just have more time, right? You can see more, you have more time. When you're inside, you have 2 tackles to deal with, you have a linebacker to deal with, and they could come from any a number of different angles, and because they're generally closer to you, you have less time to react to what they're doing. And so like you really have to be able to process quickly as a guard and center in the league, whereas as a tackle you're just kind of out on an island. And so from that standpoint, like it makes sense to me why Colton McKivitz was less of a liability than what the 49ers were dealing with at guard when John Feliciano left the game in the Super Bowl and had to take on Chris Jones, right, with Spencer Burford.
Yeah.
Right. That's never to say that a tackle is a less premium position than guard, but I think for Kyle Shanahan specifically, I don't think he'll ever view if he has like a C plus level tackle. I think Kyle Shanahan in his mind can be like, yeah, I could have Micah Parsons, and as long as I have a really good fullback and a really good blocking tight end, like maybe I could mix it up enough to where that mismatch is less of an issue than, Chris Jones against a backup right guard would be. So I'm with you in that, like maybe they draft a tackle, like that would make plenty of sense. I wouldn't have any problem with it if there's a guy there that they like. But I don't view it as like, oh man, they got to draft a tackle or fire everybody. Like I don't really look at it like that.
Yeah, so I'd be really interested. That's kind of one of the things I'm most looking forward to, because I've been sitting here this entire draft going, well, obviously they're going to take a tackle. They just need to get better. That spot, it's a deep tackle draft. You can trade up a few spots. You can but maybe you can't trade up a few spots. Maybe if you're going to trade up to get one of the top 5 or 6 tackles, you got to trade up to, like I said, maybe 19, maybe 20. And even then, you have to find a team that's willing to deal with you, because maybe that team needs a tackle too. So I was talking to our guy and University of Michigan legend Josh Dubow about this at oddly enough at the Kings game the other day, and I just kind of, the more we talked about it, the more I was like, man, I'm not 100% sure that they're just definitely going to take a tackle and then move on with their draft. Maybe they do it in the second round. Maybe Caden Wallace from Penn State in the 3rd round. Watch out. So I just wanted to get that take out there.
Sure. And a lot of the tackles, like, first of all, a lot of the tackles, I do think there's some elite guys atop the draft. Talked about it in a recent pod. 2 weeks ago? God, it's been a while since we've been.
It's been a long ass time, dog.
We've been, it's been a lot of traveling for us. So appreciate everyone hanging tough. And but like, it feels to me like at the back end of the first round, you're either taking projects who are like super toolsy, but we don't actually know that they're good at football. And guys are like, well, I think he's probably better at guard.
Yeah.
And then is it like, all right, are you going to use your first round pick on a guard or a tackle that is going to be a project that you have no idea if he can actually play at this league, but he has really long arms and looks awesome in the uniform? Like that's
But enough about Amarius Mims.
Oh, wow. Catching strays.
Well, I mean, he made 8 starts in college. You got to get this guy. Like, okay, pump the brakes.
Right. No, that's the thing. Like, we see it feels like every year there's at least a couple tackles where it's like, this guy has 46-inch arms and is a former basketball player. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
and like just like built out of granite, and it's like, yeah, but he's not good at football.
Right.
So like, let's, yeah, I get it. Traits are important, but also
Big
like
time.
being good at football is probably the most important trait.
Yeah. I would agree. Being good at football is better than being bad at football. Subscribe, rate, review.
100%. Yeah. Real quick, best beer you had in England?
I have a great answer for this. The Pale Ale by Camden Brewing Company was outstanding. They brew it like an American pale ale, where it has the hoppy flavor, but it's not as in your face as you'd find in the US. It's a really, really easy drink. And that was one of my faves. I also really loved Guinness over there. I don't care for Guinness much here. But I liked the Guinness there. And I also had, I wish I could remember the brewery, but I had, was it Nicholson's? No, it wasn't Nicholson's. I forget. There was another one I had. It was like called a Pride of London or something like that. That was very good as well. But I mean, it wasn't Cooperage, but it was still pretty good.
Nothing Cooperage. I was able to get to Cooperage over the weekend.
Yeah, I saw that. I was jealous.
Spent a couple days, took some vacation time before these NBA playoffs / play-in tournament. Go up to Santa Rosa and hang out in Russian River, Guerneville a little bit. Got a little
Mm,
cabin
mm.
for a few days. Just an elite getaway. Really, really thrilled about it. Recharged the batteries a little bit. And but yeah, went to Cooperage, of course, on the way up there. Picked up a few 4-packs. The lady got a crowler of sour, and I got some McCurdy Cove Pale Ale, delicious,
Course.
of
Yeah.
course, and obviously I got some Kexler. So
Yeah, you're
um,
not gonna not get Keg Slayer.
it was an 11 out of 10 weekend overall
Love that
up
for
in
you.
Sonoma County. So have you ever had barbecued oysters?
No, not an oyster
You're
guy.
not you're
Not a
not
seafood
okay.
guy. Mm.
Uh, I'm not a huge oyster guy. I like them occasionally. I have friends who will like order them by the dozen and just slurp those things down, and like that's kind of aggressive for me. But
Yeah, I don't love that.
like I'll have, as an appetizer, I'll have a couple. But there's a spot out in Bodega Bay. I want to shout out Fishitarian. I don't know if anybody who listens to the pod has been to Fishitarian out in Bodega Bay. Barbecued oysters, garlic butter. Just thank me later. Just unbelievable. Like just it was a cool day. It was a little rainy. These were like hot cooked oysters, not the raw,
Mm.
sort of cold one. Like these were just unbelievable. One of the best things I ever had. So shout out to Fishitarian and anybody in Sonoma County who's familiar. If you know, you know. Sonoma County, great place, turns out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, I want to ask you one more question about it. I feel like we could probably do a whole pod on England. Um, but what was your favorite part of the Harry Potter experience place that you went to? I don't even know the name of it.
It's the Universal. It's not Universal. Yeah, Universal. Why can't it? Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers.
Mm,
Studio tour. Um,
mm.
incredible. Just really, really remarkable shit. My favorite part. Um, I think my favorite. You mean like my favorite thing I saw, or like my favorite thing about it? It's two different answers.
Whatever. I mean, whatever
My
you think your
favorite thing
best
about
answer
it
is
was
gonna be.
how immersive it is in showing you,
Mhm.
because I like the books more than I like the movies. But I wanted to go to this thing just to kind of see, it's part of the lore and the history of this. And dude, it is
Yeah.
just floor to ceiling. It's not like a normal museum where you walk through and there's like exhibits. It is just the entire thing's an exhibit. Floor to ceiling props, sets, costumes. It was really, really freaking cool. And so getting to kind of go through that and see how the sausage was made a little bit was a fun thing. And there's things you get to walk through like Diagon Alley, and you get to walk through the Forbidden Forest and just kind of experience those things as close as you can. Obviously they're fantasy, they're made up, but uh,
Yeah.
having spent so much time in those places as a reader was cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's kind of
Got
like
to
how
dork out
like
all the way.
sort of similar how I felt about Rise of the Resistance, the Star Wars ride.
Mm, yes.
It's like it's obviously like I the not to get too dorky into it, but like
No,
the
do
the
it.
latest 3 Star Wars of the Skywalker saga or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
probably not my favorite. I don't hate them as much as like other people seem to,
Mm-hmm.
but just to like ride that ride and then like if you're unfamiliar with the ride, you got to ride it, but I'm going to try not to give too many spoilers here. But there's a point in the ride where you're like in one of the storage containers where like all the
Mm-hmm.
AT-ATs and ATSTs are,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like full size,
Yes.
and you're just kind of like among them, and it's like
It's
one of the coolest things, just like experiencing like those things in person, and like
totally wild.
obviously like you said, it's fantasy, but it's completely insane. So yeah, I kind of get
Well,
what you're saying. Not a
it's
Harry
cool.
Potter guy, but I know what you mean.
No, it's that sensation of, because anybody who's ever read a fiction thing or watched a fiction thing has been like, man, what if that was a real thing? And
Yeah.
then now it's just like, oh, hey, obviously it's still not real, but this is as close as you're going to get to experiencing that thing. So anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, Pedro in the YouTube chat wants to know our West playing prediction. Boy.
There's not. I went to King's practice today to write a quick story. And
Sick brag.
I worked today on a Monday, not that sick of a brag. But I mean, I know among the media members who cover the Kings, without mentioning any names, there doesn't seem to be a ton of optimism about them beating the Warriors. Whereas last year, it felt like everyone who covered the Kings was extremely confident that they were going to beat the Warriors. And then, of course, the Warriors 1-7. The Warriors are hard to predict because they are capable of imploding really at any time. Like Draymond Green could get emotionally hijacked and get a technical in the first quarter, and it screws up the entire game for the Warriors. Or the Kings offense just completely stalls with the Warriors basically playing off Domantas Sabonis and giving him all the 15-foot jumpers he wants, and he hesitates to take them, or when he does, he misses them. Can Davion Mitchell hit threes? Because I think the Warriors are going to leave him open, and
Keon
if
Ellis,
he's
same
not
thing.
hitting through, Keon Ellis, same thing, right? So, I mean, the biggest thing for me with the Kings is like, if you don't have Malik Monk, you are probably going to need 40 points from De'Aaron Fox at least, and you're probably going to need at least 20 from Sabonis. And you're going to need like a relatively efficient game from Harrison Barnes. And like, you're not going to win a game where like Keegan Murray scores 12 and Harrison Barnes scores 8.
Yeah.
Like you're probably going to need those guys to give you a lot more than that. So I'm going to pick the Warriors just because the Kings aren't going to have Malik Monk. I'd probably pick the Kings if Monk was going to play. But I have, the Kings had that stretch there where they needed every game down the stretch, and they went 3-7 and just didn't look great. And a lot of complaining about the officiating and all those things. Like, to me, I just think the Warriors, given the spot, given their experience, given that they know how to play the Kings, I think the Warriors are probably going to be my pick.
Yeah, man, it's so tough because there's, like you said, there's a chance maybe De'Aaron Fox goes for 40 and Keegan Murray goes 7 of 9 from 3 and Harrison Barnes takes advantage of whatever mismatch he's given. Like, there's a ton of paths to victory for Sacramento. And for the Warriors, for me, because I do think this year the Kings you can throw Davion Mitchell on Steph Curry and keep Davion Mitchell on the floor offensively based on how he's played the last 2 months and how he shot it the last 2 months. You could throw Keon Ellis at Steph. You can throw Keegan Murray at Steph. They have bodies to throw it at Steph Curry, so he's not pouring in 50, which, I mean, he still could, but I don't think he will. The X factor for me comes down to, and this is kind of the Warriors' whole season, is like, the Kings don't have an answer for Andrew Wiggins. The Kings don't defensively have an answer for Jonathan Kuminga. And there's a world where Kuminga and Wiggins go for like 45 points and the Warriors go and win that game. But if you're going into a game like, hey, we just need a good Andrew Wiggins game and we're set, that's a really tough spot to be in. So,
Right.
I think that, I mean, the same thing for Klay Thompson at this point. Klay's been lighting it up the last couple of days, but he's also very, very capable of going 1 of 12 from 3 and just kind of shooting the Warriors out of a game. So, I guess right now I'll pick Golden State just because I guess the vibes are a little better. But it's not a pick that is made with much confidence because there's, I mean, so many paths to victory and defeat on both sides. So, yeah.
Yeah, what I really like what the play-in has become, because I think so often in the NBA, and it happened last year in this series, like the first, the cliche is like a series doesn't start until a road team wins or whatever. A lot of times in the NBA, particularly early in the playoffs, like games 1 and 2 are just like feeling out games. And it's like, is this going to work? Is this going to work? And like a lot of teams, I mean, obviously you care about the results, but like teams aren't playing with the same level of urgency as they would in a one and done scenario, because it's like, all right, well, we're going to try to feel this out, figure out their rotations and what's going to work schematically. and then we'll apply that to the rest of the series. And how often do you see a team trailing, 2-1 after 3 games go on to win the series? Like, it just happens a lot. And it happened, the Warriors 1-7 after falling down 0-2 last year for the Kings. What the play-in does is it eliminates all of that. It's a one and done scenario. So it makes it, I think it adds a lot more variance to the game. And it might be that the Kings just have one of those games where they shoot 53s and make 20 of them. And then that's the ultimate deciding factor. And everything we're talking about is moot, or, same thing could happen with the Warriors. So that's what I think makes the play-in interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Super fascinating game, and super funny how going into last year's series, it was the Warriors trying to defend their title and the Kings trying to knock off the defending champs in their first trip back to the playoffs in 16 years, and everybody was hyped and everybody was aggro, and it was a miserable 2 weeks. And now it's this year where both fan bases are like, let's just get this shit over with. Like, let's get this season done. Neither team's winning a title. Let's move on.
I don't know that.
It's a funny vibe. No team has ever made the playoffs from the 10 seed. Winning a title out of the 10 seed is crazy.
I mean, the Heat went to the finals last year playing in the play-in.
They were an 8 seed, though. Did they host the 7-8 game? They weren't a 10 seed. That's what I'm saying.
I think they lost the 7-8 game to Atlanta, didn't they?
They did.
And then they had to play the second elimination game. So they were the 8 seed,
Yes.
So
my upset pick for the NBA playoffs is the Pacers are beating the Bucks. I've never been more sure of it.
I think there are going to be more upsets in the first round of this playoffs than any ever. I don't know what that record is, but I could see Phoenix beating Minnesota. I could see whoever ends up being
Hey, you know what? No, I'm not going to let you. I'm not letting you slander our guys in many like that. Minnesota and 5.
I'm not slandering anybody. I'm just saying I could
5.
see it. Okay, T-Wolves and 5. Shout out to Craig. I could see OKC. I could see OKC losing to whoever's the 8 seed. Like, if they get the Lakers, OKC could lose that one. I could see, to your point, I could see the Pacers beating Milwaukee. I could see the 76ers. I don't even know what seed they're. I could see the 76ers busting somebody in the first round with Joel Embiid.
The Sixers are a 7 seed.
Yeah. So, like, they could. Who's a 2 seed? I mean, look.
The Knicks.
Yeah, the Sixers could beat the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks are good, but
yeah,
I think
Knicks won 50 games.
No, I know. I saw him play,
bro. Hey, I'm gonna be honest. Hey, I love talking hoop, but we gotta go.
Okay.
Jet lag is catching up with your boy.
We're still under an hour.
I'm getting grouchy.
Okay, I feel you.
Let's start firing off my Clippers Mavs takes.
I mean, you don't have any Hawks Bulls 9-10 seed take?
Yeah, you know what? I actually do. I do have a Hawks Bulls 9-10 take. If the Bulls win that game, the loser of the Sixers Heat 7-8 game is going to want no smoke with Chicago.
Okay.
I kind of rock with Chicago, and I think they'd punch somebody in the mouth in a game in that battle for the 8 seed.
Colby White's good, and DeMar DeRozan is just kind of forever a dude that you just would prefer not to go against in the fourth quarter.
Yep. Alex Caruso, dog. Ayo Dosunmu,
one more.
Dog.
One more. Lakers over Pelicans all day. Right? In the 7-8.
Part of me wants to say that because of how the Lakers handled them. LeBron had 28, 11, and 17 in game 82.
I'm just not picking against LeBron in an elimination game against the Pelicans. Sorry. I get what the Pelicans are good at. I get they have a bunch of long defenders and, some 3-and-D guys who can shoot, and Zion who's actually in shape, and I guess BI's coming back, but like I'm picking the Lakers. Sorry.
Yeah, they dominate. Yeah, it's probably the right move. I'm probably overthinking it, trying to talk myself into the Pels.
Okay.
All right.
Good pod. We'll get out of here.
I don't know if the Pels are built asimilarly or very similarly. Still TBD.
Pedro with the question just got us way off topic.
It did.
But it shows how distracted we've been with basketball these last few weeks.
Stay tapped in for more NBA playoff takes. And we'll do some NFL draft too, I guess. Danny Kelly from The Ringer coming up as well this week, as we will continue doing our NFL draft deep dives. And now my cats are fighting, so it's time to go. Subscribe, rate, review. We're on YouTube. Search Candlestick Chronicles, or we are at Candlestick Chronicles Podcast on YouTube. Subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your pods on your favorite podcast app as well. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Peace, everybody.